Sometimes movies can disappoint us for a strange reason, not because the movie itself was bad, but because the trailer kind of gave us different expectations. I think video games actually do this quite a lot within the game itself. This indie developer sent their game to me for feedback, and while I played it, I had that same kind of disappointment, even though the game wasn't bad, but because it promised me something that it wasn't delivering. So first we'll talk about why that happened, and then we'll talk about what this developer was actually trying to do. My name is Devon, this is Games Over Qualia. This is Space Cat Solitaire by Grey Duck Games. So Space Cat Solitaire is a solitaire game, obviously, for Steam. The game itself is very much just a solitaire game. So if you've ever played Free Cell, it's very much like Free Cell. Basically, it's you have the tableau, which is a bunch of stacks of cards that you're trying to stack on the bottom. That you're constrained by certain rules, and then you have to put those cards from the bottom onto the top of little stacks. The difference is in this game, instead of stacking alternative colors, you have to stack by suit. And in here, suit is actually shown as color, which is interesting. And then you have a new suit in here that's called cosmic cards that are kind of suitless. They don't really have a suit, but I'm here to talk about my first impressions of this game. And the first impressions that I had of this game was disappointment. I felt like the game never delivered on the thing that it promised. When I'm playing the game, it feels as if it's supposed to be a game that is about something more than just solitaire, but it's not. It's just solitaire. The reason why it feels like it's supposed to be something more is because when I am first introduced to the game, I go through the story mode, and the story mode has missions, right? Right now, it only has 3 missions. They basically act as a tutorial. The weird feeling that I'm getting from this game and the strong disappointment that comes in, I think, comes from the story mode. And this is what happens, right? So the game that I described in the beginning of this, that is Space Cat Solitaire. What you see there is a logic puzzle that, one player plays with cards. That is Space Cat Solitaire. That is the base game. But the player doesn't know that when they launch the game. At least I didn't know it. When I first launched this game, I'm immediately thrown into a story mode, and it's because it also acts as a tutorial for the game. However, it does 2 things at once. It does the tutorial, so it teaches you how to play Space Cat Solitaire, but then it also starts remixing the game, and it starts making modifiers, like it gives you meteorite cards, and it gives you cards that are face down sometimes. The problem that I see here is that if I'm a player who's not familiar with Space Cat Solitaire whatsoever, and I'm playing the story mode, it feels like I never have a grasp of the base game, and it feels like all I'm playing is the remixed version, and thus it never feels like I have a core experience here. It feels like I'm constantly changing the field, and it doesn't feel like I understand what's happening. So because I'm playing this kind of story game, and it feels like I'm going to do something with the solitaire game, it never actually does anything because, well, we're not building up to anything. All we're doing is modifying the core experience, which is perfectly fine if you know what the core experience is. And I think the developer knows this because at the end of the tutorial, your character says, I should go explore free play mode, meaning that the players should go back to free play mode. They should try to understand the game a little bit more, get their bearings, understand what the core concept is, then return to the mission mode and start playing, these remixed kinds of puzzles. So that's where my confusion lies. It was disappointment because I was playing this game that was framing itself as a game that had a lot more to it, but it's not. It's just remixing a core experience, and it just never told me that the core experience is the main deal. All of the characters, all of the text, all of the fun hijinks and everything, all of that takes place in the story mode, and thus it feels like that's the main draw of the game. But rather, I think the free play mode is the main draw, or it's supposed to be, because that's where the base game lives. If this game was just a regular tabletop game, just one where, I took my deck of cards and I just put it on the table and I just played Space Cat Solitaire using those. In fact, I did that with Tabletop Simulator. I just made Space Cat Solitaire in there and played it that way. And for me, that feels like the truest form of the game. That feels like what the game should be. I feel like the game design philosophy here for Space Cat Solitaire is just a little confused. I feel like the game is meant to be just a card game, and that's it. But there's a lot of other features that are built into the game, like the story mode, like the adventure mode, like these parallel universes. It feels like we're putting more features onto a game that doesn't really need them. But as for what it's promising at this very moment, it feels like we're promising a lot more than what we're delivering. And I don't mean that in terms of early development. What I mean is that the game seems to only want to be a logic puzzle, and that's it. Maybe a better way of explaining how I feel disappointed with this game is kind of like, let's think about Klondike Solitaire. Let's think about what Klondike Solitaire would look like if we were to turn it into the same thing that Space Cat Solitaire is. And what I think would happen is that we would change it into missions, right? The first mission would be something like, get the cards from the bottom to the top, right? You start with regular cards and you just stack those cards onto the top, and that's your first mission. Second mission would be to start moving cards between piles, alternating the colors and counting downwards, and then stacking them, right? And then maybe the third mission is do that now with all the cards hidden, right? Except for the bottom card, and then you can only reveal the other one when you remove a card on top of it. That's what it feels like Space Cat Solitaire is doing. So after that, what would be mission 4 for this Klondike Solitaire variation? I don't think anything, right? I don't think there would be more. And the point here is that Klondike Solitaire is already just a game, just a logic game by itself. And if we step it out, it feels like we're building a trajectory towards somewhere, but I don't know where that place is, and we're not going anywhere. In fact, mission 3 would be the end of this trajectory. And it feels like Space Cat Solitaire is doing that. And so as I play the game, I feel like I'm building up anticipation as opposed to this kind of, sit with a game and just kind of feel it out and play it. I feel like if this game were made just with cards and no other things, there's no missions, there's no adventure mode, just in the standard play, just play the game the way it is, I feel like that would work better. And I think the way that it works with cards is actually better. I think if you were to just present it with cards with no other features, and I mean no game juice, no cats, no characters, no story, I don't think you need any of that stuff to make a compelling game. I think you have a complete logical game already the way it is. Now, if what you wanted to do was, have this cat stuff in there, that's really cool. And I like the idea that you're doing here, but I want to know, what more that does to our experience. Why put that stuff in there? Let's go into the devs' intentions here. So the first question that I asked was, what were you hoping that the player would feel while playing your game? Their answer was, during gameplay, I want the player to feel a sense of delight, calm enjoyment by simply having the game open. The experience is meant to be meditative, especially when solving more difficult puzzles. I want the player to feel a sense of reward and accomplishment. I want the player to feel like each deal is a unique challenge for their wits. Question number 2 was, why did you choose this experience? This is a very important question, I would say. Their answer was, Solitaire was a knowable space for my first game, but I didn't want to just recreate old, boring, luck-based Solitaire. I wanted to create an experience where the player has agency and that every deal felt like a fresh new challenge. I also wanted to evoke an experience that reminded me of playing card games on Pogo.com back in the day. Pogo games always had a theming and modifications to the original formulas to make them feel like they were the premier version of said game. I want to create that premier version of Solitaire. That's a great answer. My last question was, were there specific moments, mechanics, or ideas that you built around that emotional goal? Their answer was pretty short. They said, the tutorials were where I hoped a lot of those moments of, oh, this isn't your usual Solitaire game comes from. The introduction of new mechanics being unlocked and explained through story mode, what you're doing felt like it was connected to the world that you're playing in. After reading the developer's intentions, it feels as if the game was kind of made secondarily to what they had actually wanted, which I believe is just the regular Solitaire game. It's what I thought was the core game loop, which was just playing the Solitaire game itself. And the way that he described it was the premier version of a Solitaire game. And that's what that feels like. When you play this game just in standard play, and that's all it is, that feels like the truest form of the game, and it feels like that's the reason why we should play the game in the first place. Like, that's the reason we would boot up this game. I immediately want to ask myself why there's so many characters involved, and why there's a story involved, and why there's such interesting onboarding, and why is there such an interesting world built around this. I love all of this stuff. I really do like it, but it confuses me when it comes to the core reason why I'm playing the game in the first place. It feels like we're being distracted from that core essence. You know, it instead of just giving me a solitaire game and saying, hey, this is a really cool solitaire game with a lot of cat stuff in it, and it's really fun, and you get like these streaks and you get glowy cards and everything. Instead of just having that experience, we're having many missions that we're building up like a story arc and everything, and that's cool, that's fine. But why go that route when the core game loop is already here? I'd be very interested to see what's going to happen in missions 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and however many missions we get in the full game, because it feels like that is going to be the main reason why I play the game. But I'm not sure if it should be. Maybe the core reason is just to play that premiere version of Solitaire, like the developer said. Again, I look at Peggle, and the reason why that Peggle I think works in that kind of regard is that it is the same game over and over and over and over, and it shows in the story arc, right? When you're playing the story mode in Peggle, you can see different characters coming in and out, and those characters, they have different power-ups that they give the player, and so they alter the game just a little bit each time that you play, but not enough to say that the game is going to increase in complexity and, you know, make a bunch of different things. All it's doing is presenting the player with a little bit of a power-up, just here and there, and that's all you need. And I feel like, honestly, if that's what you were to do in Space Cat Solitaire, that would work really, really well. If all you were to do was to give the player that Space Cat Solitaire game, the logic game, the solitaire game that it is, and then every now and then just give them a character upgrade. You can do this one thing that gives you a strategic upper hand, and then just do that over and over with each level. I feel like that would work. I feel like that kind of Peggle kind of look would work for this game. Okay, y'all. That is everything that I have to say today. So I appreciate you all joining me. So I'll talk to you guys later.